Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Carried by the Breeze, a podcast dedicated to the voices of the future, where you'll get to be part of the most honest conversations about self-development, spirituality, and holistic health. We're here to provide the space for visionaries and entrepreneurs with a burning desire to make a positive impact on the world. I'm your host, Carrie Breeze, and today I have the pleasure to be interviewed by our previous guest, a transformation life purpose coach, Chris Meston. Chris and I share this wonderful, heartfelt conversation about the painful aftermath of a breakup. Following our own life experiences with breakups and divorce, this honest conversation offers a valuable look into the loss of self-identity and the rediscovery of trust. We talk about ways to rise up from the pain and how to find the courage to love again and open up to new opportunities. From the confusion and self-judgment to uplifting journey of personal growth, accountability, and forgiveness, join us on a transformative exploration of resilience and healing. Let's begin.
So, Carolina, why don't we talk about, this area of heartbreak and divorce? Because I know that's what that's what led me and you into this mutual, understanding and the lessons that we've learned. And that last podcast was really, a great opportunity for us to really talk things out. And we can do many episodes on this topic, but
oh yes, there's much to talk about.
Absolutely. So, when it comes to the midst of these heartbreaks, right, and these events, especially when it comes to divorce, we really learn to follow our intuition, listen to it, as well as really just learn how to follow our heart when it comes to the aftermath. And I'm just, curious from your point of view, how did that play out? What did that look like? Even during it and after you come to that, realization that this chapter is now closed, how did you end up just following your intuition? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it wasn't easy. Let me tell you that, because the aftermath of a divorce, there's so much going on because we're dealing with so many emotions that come up due to a breakup. We're going through sadness, anger, confusion, heartache, regret, guilt, all of that. And for me, it wasn't easy because I literally found myself alone. In the midst of my breakup, like I mentioned in our previous episode together, I was in a new country. I didn't have many friends here. I was still a student, so everything was online. I was isolated. My dear ex-husband, and it was a wonderful marriage. It was a wonderful, really beautiful divorce. It wasn't anything too dramatic. And, we experienced a lot of pain. It wasn't easy. We were together for almost a decade. But he went back home to our home country, and I remained here alone. And although I still had his financial support, which I really, really appreciated, of course, being out of a job and a student, and I didn't have any life savings, but I felt so isolated and so angry that I led myself into this point in my life. And it was just hard to break from this victim's mindset, just being alone and feeling like my whole world was crumbling around me and I didn't have anybody to lean on but myself. And I think this is the journey that we need to learn to embrace, how to stop leaning on the world around you and find your own power, right? Tap back into your intuition and what makes you feel alive again. So that's the toughest part, which we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you've, invested and when you have that person by your side for as long as you've had, and that as long as I had as well, there's that mutual, existence, and you're looking out for the other person's need. And like you said, as soon as you come to that point where now you're really left with really just yourself and picking up the pieces and learning to really start over again. And sometimes when you're in that state, you really don't know which direction to go to. So having that self-reflection and having that opportunity to just listen to your heart and find out, okay, like what is the next steps moving forward. And I know that we both, share something in common just regarding the way that we've been looking at the world. And I know that,
Yes.
I know our exes, really had perhaps a different worldview and an understanding of what's been going on. And I think that, deeper level of understanding and awareness of the world that we find ourselves in and the opportunity that we can still use in the midst of that brokenness to take one step at a time and to figure out, okay, this circumstance and this tragedy that I'm in right now, there's an opportunity for something more than ourselves. There's an opportunity for us to go into a direction that is going to give us greater fulfillment and greater purpose. But first and foremost, we need to do that. We need to do that inner work and we need to heal.
For sure. There's so much to detach from in that process, not only your ex, but just the feelings of betrayal. I know for sure that I felt betrayed for a while.
Yeah. It's a really painful experience, right? Like betrayal, hurt, really feeling that pain of, understanding that that person isn't the person that you really thought, they would turn out to be. And that can really take a toll on your ability to really.
And it's not even to say anything negative about them, right? Everybody's entitled to be who they want to be in this world. It's just like your own understanding of the relationship is crumbling down in the process. This is where the betrayal lies, basically.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's also like our perception, right? And the way that we, because I don't know about you, but I'm always the kind of person that loves to give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm a very
yes.
by nature, I'm a very like, silver lining kind of guy that I always like to see the positive in every situation. And I don't think that's a bad quality to have. But I think
that's why both of us love Hallmark movies.
Right? I know, right? Who doesn't love a classic love story and a classic Hallmark movie?
It tells a lot about a person. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. But the thing is that, this topic of being able to trust ourselves, right? So in the midst of experiencing a painful chapter, an event like a divorce, often we can look into ourselves and think, man, like, how am I ever going to be able to really trust my intuition? Because we made that decision to invest and to go down the path of marriage.
Yes.
And at the time, it probably felt so right in our intuition and in our heart's yearning, right? And then,
oh my God, yes.
Then we experience, a painful reality, and then that allows us to kind of look in the mirror and say, like, we look at our blind spots and say, okay, like,
what was I doing? What was I thinking?
Well, exactly, right? And so, like, I'm just wondering, like, for you, how does that trust factor play out when it comes to, your decisions that you're making right now in life, and even for the potential reality of loving again and finding somebody? Would you look to be changing any of that, or is there any?
Oh my God, for sure. Like, okay, let me go back a little bit. Mm-hmm. I married my ex-husband twice.
Okay.
Twice. Okay. First time we eloped. We took ourselves to a beautiful island next to Greece, and it was just the two of us. It was beautiful. I never thought that it's gonna make me as emotional as it did. But I was in a room with the man that I considered to be my entire future, with the man I wanted to grow old with, and it touched me because, I've never been the kind of girl that was excited about marriage and the white dress and everything, but it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I married my ex-husband out of love, and then we came back home. We were married for a year, and we decided to leave for a different country, and COVID happened, and lockdowns and all of that, and we kind of squeezed this little wonderful, romantic, beautiful wedding right between the lockdowns, right before we left to Canada. So we married each other the first time just us in a room with some Greek lady.
Okay.
And the other time surrounded by family and friends. And both of these times I was convinced that this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. I'm making the best decision of my life. We were great together. We had a beautiful household together. Every time that people came in, they told us how beautiful it is, how warm it feels, how our relationship just feels so wholesome, because we had a great friendship between us. Like my ex-husband, God bless him, great guy,
Yeah.
literally. Like, I know that life took us different places, and all these tough feelings that we've went through, but I don't have negative feelings about my my previous marriage, although the aftermath wasn't easy to go through.
Yes.
But yeah, I just remember after our breakup thinking, God damn it, I've made it twice. How can I ever trust myself again? Not even thinking about, will I ever love again?
Yeah.
Like, that was something that wasn't even on my mind. I was so broken. And it was such a tough thing, because I think whenever that kind of thing happens, like I said, your entire world starts crumbling down, and you start questioning yourself. Where did I go wrong? Like, am I dumb? Like, I've made this decision. I put myself here, and it requires a lot of awareness, self-awareness, taking responsibility over your actions and your choices. And you're like, shit, am I going to be one of these people who are going to have multiple marriages until they hit it, hit the jackpot? So it's quite a journey to learn to trust yourself again. And I did a lot to regain that trust.
For sure. It absolutely, it plays a toll, right? Like you said, when we made that decision to say I do, none of us anticipate and would ever want to think about the prospect of that not working out.
Yeah.
And when you're describing that romantic scene, on that second I do, that second wedding, I really sense, and you're a lot like me, like I think we are definitely that hopeless romantic type. And I really admire your maturity to still look back and to still recognize the beauty and the positive parts of that marriage, right? Because a lot of people,
for sure,
a lot of people can get really bitter, and they can really play the blame game, but the reality,
I've been there, done that for a while.
100%. And I can really resonate with that, right? Because of course things didn't work out the way that we wanted it. But I can look back on, my marriage with Vanessa, and I definitely have fond memories, right? I have fond memories of the place that I proposed to her. I have fond and great memories of the love and the chemistry and the energy that we had. And so I think that's part of the healing process, is to do some self-reflection, like you said, learning how to trust ourselves, but still acknowledge that same person that you were at the pinnacle of being on cloud number 9 while you were ready to start this new life. I still believe that you're still that same Carolina, and I'm still that same Chris, who still has that romantic zest and that energy for wanting to trust ourselves again.
The romance isn't gone. It's just that so much has been added on top of that, so much experience and a better understanding of who we are and the choices we're making. Because let me be honest and vulnerable here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is what we came here to do.
Sure.
Looking back, I've done my healing. I've went in. I dived in. I did a lot of stuff to understand just myself better as a person, and I realized that, and it was a painful realization. I realized that the first time I wasn't honest with myself, and I wasn't honest with myself the second time. I was just playing and dancing with the illusion of having a family and having a home. And I literally felt ashamed and guilty that I dragged not only myself, but another person into that illusion just because I
Yes.
convinced myself that I'm going to make it despite everything. I'm very feisty. I'm a fighter. I make things work. Like I've been a producer for many years, so I'm a problem solver. And I thought that it's just going to be one of these problems that I learn how to solve. Although I saw a lot of the problems that might grow and develop in our relationship. And still, I kept on lying to myself. And I was like, I'll change myself in the process, you know? And it's a
Yes.
dangerous thing to do because we do want to change and grow with the people we're with, with, for them, through them, by them. We want to go through that growth. But the
Yes.
question is, are you betraying yourself and your values through that change? And who is it that you're becoming? And I became this sort of a dulled down version of myself, a version that isn't as honest with herself or with her environment all the time, and it was tough to see that I literally spent almost a decade lying to myself that this is it because I wanted a family, you know?
That is a very vulnerable and honest reflection. And thank you for sharing that with me and the audience, because a lot of people will not take that necessary self-inventory and to really honestly look at really the inner workings and the narrative that they were intending to play out in the midst of a marriage. And I can really relate to that. With me, I also wanted to fulfill the ideal image to my friends, my family, my coworkers, to the world. I just really wanted to live up to that, to that ideal, that North
Yeah.
American standard. And
Yeah, get married, have a family, pop some kids out. What you waiting for?
exactly. And so, looking back, I definitely, one of the things that I think we share in common is that I am very stubborn as well. I'm very persistent. And one of the lessons I've looked back and learned is that I should have maybe taken a little bit less pressure off of the gas pedal on wanting to change her, and do more listening and understanding of the concerns and maybe some of the warning signs that I was seeing, instead of me just trying to be Mr. Fixer.
Yeah.
Because maybe that's
Ooh, I feel ya.
maybe that's the inner coach in me and you, that we really want to
That's
help fix.
terrible, though. We're not there to fix them. I
No.
mean, first of all, who gave us the right? Second of all, is that really love? Is that what we want to be doing? Do we
Well,
want to change them? Like change for me. You're supposed to be growing into me, man. you know?
absolutely. And I think what I was doing is I was holding her to the standard that I was holding in myself. And that it can be a very dangerous thing when you start projecting your expectations onto her,
Yeah.
with the same level of expectations I had to myself. And you're absolutely right. That can be very dangerous because every person has a unique identity and their own ways of sorting out their own issues and self-growth. And so
Yeah.
there was definitely, looking back in that inner reflection for myself, it was, and it still is, a continuous, I have to continuously sometimes remind myself of the areas that I would do differently moving forward when I get back into a committed relationship, right? It's
Yeah.
that constant level of self-awareness, which I think is so important.
Yeah. I feel
So
like sorry to cut you off there, but I feel like it is dangerous because it lacks the sensitivity needed in that kind of process. Because again, when two people come together, they kind of make this commitment to constantly listen to each other, to be there for one another. And it doesn't mean that you get this person that you get to break through like it's a wall. We're going to be constantly growing and twining into each other, and that requires a lot of sensitivity, because the person in front of you isn't always ready for the next evolution, for the next step, and you might be so much forward, far ahead, but have the patience. If you don't have that, if you don't have the patience and the sensitivity, what are you doing here to begin with? Like the one thing that matters here, if the person on the other end is willing to
Yes.
follow the lead, sort of, to be there in that journey, this is what makes the difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. And looking back, I think providing that space, right, for her to be seen and understood, instead of me just trying to be Mr. Fixer and doing my best to point her in the right direction. I really think it's so important to respect that other person and to, like you said, provide as much space as possible, and to understand that they're also on their own evolution and their growth journey in this area. So yeah, who would have known that we'd get into a therapy discussion today? Hey, Carolina. It is
what it is. It is what it is. It's just
exactly. So question for you now. Are you ready to, and I think I know the answer to this, but are you ready to love again, Carolina? Are you like,
God, I was always ready to love. I am love. I am the embodiment of love. It's just that nowadays I know how to love better. I know how to love truer, if you could say that.
Yes.
And I saw with my own eyes what is unconditional love. And that's just endless trust. And me, coming from a broken household and having a lot of abandonment issues, let me tell you that I used to hold on to my relationships like, like it's my life is depending on it, and I thought that if I pump my assertiveness into that, and all of me, and I give and I give and I give, that means love. But love, it works both ways. It's just a constant communication. It's trust. It's never expecting anything in return. It's just knowing that by you being there and feeling worthy, it's coming. You don't need to worry. You don't need to convince anybody to love you. You don't need to prove yourself. God damn it. Because people love you because they love you. They love you for who you are, or they don't love you at all.
Exactly.
And this is something that I've learned, and of course I'm ready to love again. Of course. And it was painful because, not even talking about my divorce. Yeah, that happened when almost, I want to say 2.5, 3 years ago. I've been through my recent breakup just 6 months ago. And that killed me. It destroyed me. It left me broken. It left me penniless. It left me dealing with all sorts of emotions. And it happened after a very, very significant mushroom trip I had. So I was tripping, let me tell you, for months after that happened. And I really had to put myself back piece by piece and literally gain a new sense of identity. Because same as my divorce, but this breakup in particular made me ask myself, who am I? Who am I? That's the one question I think a lot of us are dealing with, especially when you're left all alone, without the person who used to reflect back to you, who was your mirror. It was a
absolutely.
tough question.
It really is. It's a really good segue into identity, which we'll get into just in a minute. But I really admire your resilience that despite, the divorce and despite your breakup, there still is an unwavering hope and a desire to love again. And I think that's really important because a lot of people can allow bitterness and they can allow these setbacks relationally to really jade their ideal outlook for their future, and they can often harbor and hold on to a lot of toxicity, and the ability to still make that decision to say no, like I believe, like I definitely believe I'm going to love again, and I know it within my heart. And I think that's so valuable. And I remember hearing a really good perspective from a good friend of mine, and he basically says, somebody who has taken the chance on love and at marriage and who has been divorced actually shows a lot of courage, right? Because you took that risk of going all in and loving somebody.
I'm that kind of girl. All in.
For sure. And
ride or die.
Absolutely. And you can often develop a deeper sense of love after divorce, going at it a second or even a third time. You have a deeper and a mature understanding of what love is because you've experienced it at its highest and you've also experienced it at its lowest. And so it does show a tremendous amount of courage and bravery, and you learn to love more deeply, right? Because you realize everything that's at stake, right? It's this light darkness duality of, you're taking a chance and you may get hurt or you may go well, but you just become a lot more sensitive to that reality.
You know what's funny? I feel like nowadays that I've learned to love myself better and to see myself, and I've answered the question of who am I? I love my exes way more than I loved them when we were in the midst of our relationship. That is crazy. That is mind-blowing, but it's just the relationship is so much clearer now. The lessons that I've learned through it are so significant and so profound. And finding myself, even through that pain, it was worth it. God damn it. I asked myself so many times, was this worth it? You've wasted time. You've wasted your heart, your feelings, your emotions, whatever. Yeah, but it's all a question of the prism you're looking through, right? If you're looking at it from a perspective of loss, or was it a lesson to you? And it's like you said, it's so hard to break through the self-judgment and the toxic patterns that we develop during a breakup. I believe me, I well, I don't like to admit it, but I was literally dependent on weed to survive. Through months after that breakup, like I developed an addiction, like a literal addiction, because I couldn't deal with the self-judgment, with everything that I was, the guilt. I felt guilty for breaking the relationship apart, for potentially hurting another person, for, again, the time wasted, right? That's the one thing that is never coming back, our time. And yeah, it takes a lot to climb up from the pit bottom and to find yourself again and to answer all these questions. And god damn it, the harmful patterns we develop. Some people shut themselves down. Some people develop this avoidance from the world. I'm never gonna love again. This is the end of me. This is the end of my life. That's it. I'm never getting back to dating or whatever. But weed, self-harm, alcohol, like it happens. It's human, right?
Yeah.
It's one way to deal, but that's a question of how much time you want to be, again, wasting on that as well, and letting the hurt to perpetuate itself, and being stuck in that cycle.
For sure. Yeah. And you know what? Like, again, your vulnerability, I think, is really going to help encourage those who may have also coped in that similar manner, right? Whoever's listening, I'm sure if they were honest with themselves, to some extent, we all have our own coping mechanisms, whether it's through alcohol, whether it's through weed, whether it's through porn, whether it's through any other, harmful.
Sex. Yeah,
Yep,
just
yep,
like
meaningless,
meaningless sex that just shuts your emotions, like people deal in a lot of ways.
Yep, absolutely. And it's very common. And I think it's really important that we recognize those coping strategies and we learn from those mistakes, right? Because it
Yeah.
takes a lot of guts to be able to soberly, get through those trials and those difficult periods without having to resort to those harmful coping strategies, because
Yeah.
that's when you're really left to face and to really go through that healing process. And it's not fun, right? Because when we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and genuinely and authentically go through that work,
Yeah.
it's not going to be easy, but I think what's over on the horizon of that is such a better and just a better you, right? You're going to be able
Oh, it
to.
made me who I am. Quite literally. Like I couldn't see it back then, but it's funny because the question of who am I was kind of embedded into that breakup, into my most recent one, because oh, it's just such a trip to be talking about it now, just months after when I've done all this healing, right? But it was literally the question of who am I was at the heart of it, because at that time, I was going through my own processes. I took a deep dive into hypnotherapy, and
Okay.
I was doing hypnotherapy every day, multiple times a day, which isn't advised because the integration process takes time. But being just this crazy person I am, I guess,
Mhm.
but I go hard. Like literally, I don't have mercy towards myself sometimes. Like it's something that I needed to learn how to just take it easy, take it easy. But I was doing a lot of hypnotherapy. I was healing core wounds. It was the first time in my life where I had the courage to look at the hurt I had festering inside of me that was literally kind of, it was just affecting everything in my life. How I see my relationship, my romantic relationship, because my fear of abandonment was, it was there. I could feel it inside that relationship, and I needed to let go of that, because my partner at the time reflected it back to me, like, stop being scared that I'm gonna leave, like, woman.
Yes.
Relax. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because my gut was twisting, my intuition was going like you know and
Yes.
I started healing a lot of core wounds that I never had the courage to touch on before that. I had the opportunity to forgive my abusive mother, not in a sort of, calling her up and fixing the relationship or something of that sorts, because
Mhm.
she's out of my life, God bless. But I fixed that within myself. I went through so many forgiveness processes. I let go of a lot of stuff. But what happens in that time is that the world you knew before that starts crumbling down, quite literally. Like your sense of identity starts changing and shifting. And I was so out of my resource. I was about to leave Canada and go to Florida, become a mom to two children that I dearly, dearly love to this day,
Mhm.
to become a wife to this man that I didn't meet too long ago, and I started to have my doubts and questions, and the question of who am I and how do I serve this new family? How do I serve this man that I love so dearly? How do I become a mother to children that are waiting for me in a whole different country? The just detachment from Canada. When I moved there, I already had some kind of life there, and I had to go back home to Israel and be there for a while, and everything was so crazy and all over the place, and I had so many open questions. And what started happening is that all my fears, all my destructive patterns, all this shit, like literally shit, started floating to the surface. And being out of resource and tired and malnourished and scared, it just, it did what it did. It made me so scared and so distrusting that it kind of destroyed the relationship at some point, and I had to deal with the guilt that I felt for that, that not seeing in time, not being in my resource, not showing up as myself. But this is something that we touched on before.
Yes.
I felt that my partner at that time lacked the sensitivity to see where I was, to see my pain and the growing pains that I was going through. And he wasn't providing me the space to grow anymore. He wasn't sensitive to the changes that I was going through. He wasn't there to answer my questions. He was there to just tell me, shut the fuck up, like let's move on, like stop being like that. And I'm like, but I am like that. Like, help me out, and it's painful because you learn to realize that you got to find yourself, man. You got to find yourself. Nobody has the answers for you. Nobody could answer who are you. Just you. It's just you. Which I did when the relationship was over.
For sure. Absolutely. And I definitely resonate as you're talking about, how your ex wasn't able to, spot the writing on the wall and to acknowledge and to seek to understand, the areas that you were struggling in during that time in your marriage. It's interesting because I'm actually looking at that example and perspective that you just brought up, and I'm looking at that through my lens towards my lack of ability.
We weren't married. We were talking about getting married. Glad I didn't do another, another swift decision.
Right? But clearly you guys were still like in that stage of really like falling for each other, but still missing some of those blind spots. I know I could have done a better job, Carolina, of spotting those and recognizing those areas, and in Vanessa as well. That was an area of opportunity that I could have capitalized on and been more reflective, but such is the case that when these chapters are over, the most important part is to understand and to do that reflection and self-awareness, to really take that accountability on our end and say, okay,
oh yes,
what could I have done differently? What could have I done to help recognize, while not, getting too down on ourselves, because we can't take a time machine and go back and change it, but we can absolutely, use those inner lessons for the future. Back to the idea of identity, right? And answering the question of who am I? Because I know that our idea of our identity in the midst of our marriage and leading up to it was a lot different than what our identity is right now. Looking back, when I was married, it's almost like it's a faint memory in terms of, the type of person that I was. Like right now, I really feel that I've grown and I'm such a different person. So kind of walk us through how you were able to shift your identity and how you were able to understand what that led up to at this moment in time.
Yeah, well, letting go of the guilt and the shame and the self-harm patterns, like I literally wanted to hang myself. I hate saying that, but it was probably the most painful thing I've been through, because quite literally my world has collapsed. This is something that I didn't feel during my divorce, like although I was alone and isolated and all of that, but this last breakup literally obliterated me. I think we've talked about it before, about the dark night of the soul, where your life is just breaking at the seams and you're just there, lost and confused. And I literally asked myself, what is there? out there for me now that I'm quite literally experiencing this death of the self, death of love, death of a relationship. I kind of the breakup happened like a few days before I moved out from Canada to Israel, when Israel was supposed to be just a small stop before my newfound marriage, my new family, so it was crazy. So I had to quite literally take this bag of negative emotions, of literal death, and pump so much life into it. And first of all, I owe a lot to my family and my friends who have been there, because going back to Israel, I have to admit, I hated going back. I hated going back because there's a reason why I left to begin with. I lost my sense of home a long time ago, and I was constantly on the chase of finding a home, finding my tribe. I feel like it defied me a lot of years, many years in my life. But I had to ask myself, is this it? Like, quite literally, I'm dead right now, emotionally, physically. I was in a very bad physical state, let me tell you. I'm not gonna go into that, but my weed addiction was just part of it. But I was literally malnourished. My blood tests were all over the place. I was not in a good condition. But yeah, my family, my surrounding, was a big cushion that I could fall on. And I really want to get more into just the relationships that we have around us, because that also changes when you're going through a breakup. You experience a lot of shifts there as well. We're going to get into that in a second. But what I did is just, I made a decision to live again, to love again, to not let that death define me. I quite literally chose to rise up. I was like, listen, I know you're hurting. I know you want to, put your hands in the air and say, that's it. I had it. Like, let me go. But nope. You're going to survive this. You're going to rise up. Let's think about how it's going to be done. And the one thing, and I always, I'm a big advocate of breathwork, being a breathwork facilitator. It helps me heal other people as well. It's like the one modality that I'm working with a lot these days. But I just put a list of all the things that could help me right now to feel better, to feel alive again. And I started incorporating these things into my life, one by one, slowly, step by step. And I thought through everything. I had all the resistance in the world. I didn't want to go outside, but I was like, you're going to do that. You're going to go into your fear now. Like, this is what we're doing. We're going into your fears, into the uncomfortable feeling, I don't want to's and I can't, and you're going to tackle them one by one. And that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. It doesn't happen in a day. It's not a magic pill you take. It's a process you commit to because you understand that you are worthy despite the guilt and the shame and the hurt and everything that holds you.
For sure. You brought up a lot there, and you're right. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight when it comes to reshaping and reprogramming, your identity, because the guilt and the shame, everything that you mentioned, it stays so attached to you, especially when it's so fresh after experiencing that. You just feel like, and on top of that, you're now also having to, like you mentioned, with the relationships that we have or the people that we're aware of our circumstance and the reality that it's no longer, what we thought it would be. You're now having to combat that perception of how people are viewing you while you're looking to really, rise up from the ashes and trying to make sense and to take that decision to move forward. And I think that those modalities and those areas that you were immersing yourself in is so important, right? Because if we don't have a strategy and if we don't have these different practices that will allow us to heal and move forward, that can really stagnate, and that can really prevent us from accelerating into that new identity. I remember going to a coffee shop, and this was roughly about 3 to 4 months after the divorce. And I ran into an old coworker, and she's like, I was at the coffee shop, and she came up and she's like, oh, Chris, how are things with you and your wife? She clearly didn't know.
Which wife?
Right? She clearly didn't know that it didn't work out. And I remember feeling my core body temperature start to go up, the anxiety.
Sweating.
Yeah, absolutely. I was definitely, breaking out a bit of a sweat. And I remember
when you need to say that, oh, that didn't work out.
That's exactly what I said.
Shame.
Yeah, I had to face the music, and I remember that encounter well, because that was one of the beginning of many other types of conversations with the other acquaintances or people that I haven't spoke to in a while. And I had to get used to acknowledging that reality to people. And so that was also part of my identity, was understanding, all right, Chris, so how are you going to recuperate, and how are you going to move forward from what you thought was a sure thing, right? Like my identity at that time was, being this lucky guy, being a husband, hopefully being
Look at all the riches I've got. Look
exactly.
at love.
Exactly. And, and then I had to, like, similarly to you, I had to make a decision. Right. And during that time as well, I was self-medicating, right? I was, heavy into weed as well. And I just was taking some shortcuts and some unhealthy patterns and behaviors. Yeah. And I needed to really just go through this cold turkey healing process. But to your point, having relationships of people around you that genuinely care about you is so important. The friends, my brothers, that came alongside of me and that didn't hold judgment, but that were really there to walk alongside of me. And funny enough, I found the most support from those who have experienced it firsthand as well, because they know the pain. They know the pain. They know the that reality. And so
it'd be like that.
We, this is our life story. We use our pains, we use our hurts to help others. And so I was the recipient of that when it came to other people in my life who experienced that tragedy as well. But when it comes to relationships, though, as well, not everyone is always going to also be supportive, right? There are also other people in our life that will not, necessarily understand, where
there is the resistance.
Absolutely. And so this is actually a good segue, because even on our self-healing journey as well, and we talked about this the other day, but even when we're making active steps to become better people and to do the personal growth and to help others, sometimes other people, even very close people in our life, will not always understand or respect that either. And so I'm wondering, from your experience, Carolina, how has that played out in terms of really not getting that understanding and that support, or maybe even getting some of that separation or pushback regarding unlikely people in your life?
Well, I have a few stories to tell. Well, first of all, I said before, making a plan, right? When you're experiencing all of that, this dark night of the soul. I love how it sounds. It's so dramatic. So much drama. But I don't want to be overwhelming anybody who's listening with like, make a plan, because sometimes experiencing all of that, you can't possibly make a plan because you're at the pit bottom and you're like, my plan is to wake up. My plan is to survive, man. So let your plan be exactly that. Let the plan be, there is no giving up. Like, giving up is not an option. Like, let that be your plan. Okay, start there. Start with waking up in the morning. Start with taking that shower. And just circling back to what you said, relationships around us and people not having it. So here I am going back to Israel, right? And where I was supposed to go back and, announce to my family, yo, guys, like, I found the love of my life. And at that time, my youngest sister knew that I had plans to get married. Like, she was the only person that I told to. And she was like, just by listening to me, she was like, Carolina, how does it feel to find the love of your life? And I was like, oh, that is so sweet, because she could sense just by my stories and how I was talking about that relationship that for me it was it. It was it. It was the answer to all my questions. It was my dream come true. And where I had to go back and be like all excited and tell everybody, all right, you better get ready for a Floridian wedding this summer. And let me tell you, I had plans for this wedding. I had it in my mind. Oh my God. It would have been the wedding of the century, Chris. My God. But yeah, I had to go back home and tell everybody I failed. I miserably failed. I just invested 2 years in building a business I was quite literally kicked out of. I invested all my savings to the last penny, not even thinking that the breakup was possible. I was just so in. And I had to admit a lot of things which just are summed up into a failure, right? And some people were there for me to hold me through the pain of my failure. And I'm putting it in brackets because I don't see it as a failure. I didn't see it back then as such. I don't see it as such right now. But yeah, some people were there and were accepting, and I kind of fell into their embrace. And some people treated me like I was a failure. Some close people to me were like, this again. Like, this again? Literally, you had a divorce 2 years ago. Like, what is wrong with you, girl? And it was painful to see. It was painful to experience, because at that point I was feeling abandoned by my partner back then, and now I'm being abandoned by more people who have so much more judgment towards me. Like, you can't judge me more than I judge myself, but you need to deal with that. And you need to just buckle up for the ride and realize that not everybody is going to be accepting of this new reality. Like, just to tell you a short anecdote about my divorce, right? When I was divorcing my ex-husband, I had this female friend. Okay, we're not going to mention any names just to keep it respectful. And she was kind of my only friend back then. And of course, she was the first person to know that, okay, I'm like, me and Joe, my ex-husband, we decided to get a divorce, but it's okay. It's chill. We're not fighting. It's all good. Just be here for me. Like, I need somebody to talk to. And she was like, no. She's like, I can't have you single. Like, she was trying to convince me to get back to my ex-husband because she couldn't deal with having a single friend. I know you guys as a couple, like, you come in a couple. Like, it was so silly to me, and now learning what I've learned, seeing people more clearly, I know the kind of patterns and where the toxicity was coming from, because she quite literally destroyed the relationship around my decision to have a divorce. She was just not having that. She was like, "Oh, you've changed now. You're flirting with boys outside." Ugh. And I'm like, I'm just trying to live. I'm just trying to move forward, and people are not having that. It's like they expect you to stay in that pitiful, victimized state of mind. And it's like, hello, I've done my hurting. I've done my healing. I'm ready. And it doesn't make my relationship less meaningful if I did that in a few months and not in a few years like you expect me to, you know?
For sure. Yeah. And it's painful, right? It's painful because those are the very friends and the people that, that
It's
you
shocking.
really it is shocking because you would expect and hope that they would come alongside of you, and when you don't get that support, it can be very tough to deal with. I'm reminded of someone who I've been friends with since high school, and within a year after the aftermath of things not working out with Vanessa and I, he just dropped off the map. He just stopped talking to me altogether.
He wanted you as a couple. You can't be a single.
I still don't know fully the reason why it happened.
Different dynamic, man. I can't deal.
It's sometimes it's just tough for people to understand or to see your point of view and what your reality now has become, right? Because he is happily married with kids, and sometimes the other half may discourage and play a part in that friendship being brought down, because to them it may seem or be viewed as an unhealthy friendship for them to maintain, because they're not living up to the same standards as they are. And it hurts, right? It hurts when it comes from those people that you've known for so long.
Yeah, it's like they resent you for failing and they resent you for succeeding to get out of the failure. It's like, it's just it proves me one thing. Whoever isn't meant to be in your life will find a way out. And it's funny that exactly in these trying times, you get to see relationships around you so much clearer. You know what I mean? Like, you see who's there, you see who has changed through your change, who has all this judgment towards you, and I think it's a good thing. It is painful, but again, I feel like it's so important to learn to detach from relationships. And it doesn't matter if it was like 2 years, 2 months, 20 years, like, God bless it. I had to quite literally detach from a lot of relationships in the last few years, and although the latest breakup was the most painful one, I feel like nowadays, I'm so much stronger, Chris. I'm so much stronger. Instead of feeling the tragedy of the loss, I feel the opportunity in the space that was made. Yes, it's sad when people are just quite literally leaving. You end up in this new space asking yourself, like, is this forever gonna stay vacant? But nowadays, I just trust. I trust that if something went and left, it means one thing: it wasn't supposed to be here. It wasn't. Let it go and trust that it's coming back. Like, I've seen this beautiful reel by these two guys. It's a new channel I'm following. Forgive me, I do not remember the name, but it was this short reel about this sea anemone living on the beach, and it's this little pretty insignificant creature living on the rocks, and wherever there's tide, people come there, and it looks like it's gonna suffocate and die without the water, and this guy asks, like, isn't it gonna die? And the other guy explains, like, no, it knows that the sea will come back, with all the nourishment and the life. It knows. And he's like, how does it know? And the other guy goes, like, it just trusts, man. It knows. Like, it's in his DNA to know. You think that the hungry tiger in the jungle goes, spends his day being like, this fucking hunger, I better go and hang myself, man. Like, I'm so goddamn hungry. No, it knows that eventually something will come that will perpetuate the continuance of life, the survival, So this is the unconditional love that I'm talking about. This little sea anemone spending its days on the shore, waiting for the sea to come back with all the nourishment and everything it needs in order to survive. It's not there sitting thinking, the sea left. Oh, poor me. I'm never gonna have that again. It's never coming back. I'm so let me go on Tinder, find another sea. It knows. It just knows. It's in its DNA, this unconditional love, this endless trust that you will be taken care of. Just know. Just know that it's coming. So let that shit go. Let all these toxic relationships go. Like, don't even look back, But we are talking about relationships that made us feel alive, because that's what love does to you. You're feeling alive. God damn it. My last relationship, I literally felt like I had wings, man. We were a powerhouse. I spent my days feeling so confident in my own skin. I loved life. And when you lose that feeling, it's so hard to gain that trust. This is what we started this episode with, right? With the trust you need to gain back. But just the knowing, the lack of disbelief, the trust, man. It's just trust. It is what it is. And it comes from self-worth, knowing that you're worthy. Just by the sake of your creation, you are worthy. The sea is coming back, my friend. So
yes,
that's my spiel.
Beautifully put, beautifully put. And when you have that attitude and that mentality and that knowing, that regardless of where you are right now, sooner or later, you're going to be using that, whatever's going to be coming at you in life, you're going to be able to use that as an opportunity for growth. And you just know that your opportunity for that nourishment and that unconditional love will be coming. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, right? It's that tide.
Exactly. Precisely.
Yeah, for
not
sure.
Not a question of if, it's a question of when. And the fact that you've failed, again, in brackets, at one relationship doesn't mean that this is it. Don't hang yourself yet. Not quite yet, my friend. You've got other stuff coming.
Absolutely.
It's your next evolution. It's the evolution of the mind, of the heart. It's your chance to reignite, rise up. Failure is not an option.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that saying that, life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, right? So
beautiful.
Yeah. So even in the midst of what may seem to be, negative events that may happen in the future, like we've talked a lot about this in our last episode of reframing and developing new ways of looking at our circumstances.
Yeah.
When we become better and better at recognizing every, event that happens into our life as an opportunity instead of as an excuse to go back to old toxic patterns or old mindsets, that will only make us stronger, and we'll be able to become more resilient in the long run, and it'll just sharpen us more and more.
Yeah.
Right. Which is
redefining loss into a win.
Absolutely. And one of the perspectives I've shifted regarding relationships is that when you're growing, right, especially when you and I are taking this journey of personal growth, um, this idea of understanding that not everyone is going to be able to come alongside you and to understanding
Accommodate your growth.
yeah, like
Part of it.
yeah, the reality is that as we grow, not everyone's going to be able to see things from the same vantage point as we are. So that metaphor of growth itself, um, it's really important for us to understand, and we shouldn't expect other people to to look at things from the way that we do, because as we
Yeah,
grow, our awareness of our reality and our awareness of life's experiences naturally is going to be different from those who aren't growing at the same level as we are. And so this is a lesson, and this is an important topic of discussion, because sooner or later, right, as we grow, we're going to be able to identify and to understand other people who are investing in that same level of growth. But unfortunately, some people are just not going to be able to come along for the ride.
for sure.
And it doesn't have to be viewed always in a negative light, right? We just need to understand, well, that's the reality of it, right? Just like
That is just life.
yeah, yeah,
Life.
exactly. For sure. So I'm really grateful that, you and I at least have been able to resonate and we're able to understand that, because sometimes it does get lonely, right? When you're growing and you're not able to always connect with others who see that same perspective, it can be a little bit lonely at times.
Oh yes. Oh yes. And I feel like I've been dealing with loneliness for so many years, my last name, my original last name, and quite literally means lone wolf. And
Mm,
I've stepped away from it back in 2009 when we changed that ancient family name we had for generations into Breeze, because my dad and I, we wanted kind of step out of this loneliness and isolation into something else that has a different energy to it, a different ring. So that's how we
mm,
became the Breezes, right?
yeah.
Uh, that's how the world is being carried by the breeze now, my friend. But quite literally, loneliness is. I felt it like it was imbued into my each and every cell for the majority of my life. Growing up in an to an abusive mom, yeah. We couldn't talk about it, and I felt like I didn't have a safe space to share and express myself, and I felt lonely. I know what loneliness is. I know what it is when you feel like you're screaming and there's nobody in the world who would hear you. And you start
Yeah.
to question your own existence, like, who am I? Is just one. It's just one of the many, many, many questions that we as people have. So
Yeah.
and it's terrible to see, because that being in the doing the line of work that I'm doing right now, especially having a podcast and tapping into so many incredible minds, especially talking with younger people, you
Mm,
understand that loneliness is the new pandemic. you know
yeah.
there isn't any shot against it, buddy. you know there isn't a magic pill. It's just the reality of the world. It's the reality of the society we live in, and it's our choice to redefine it, to find power in times when you're lonely. I think we talked about it in our previous episode, loneliness versus solitude,
Yes.
which is a very, very significant and profound difference. Okay.
Yeah.
So it requires self awareness and the decision. Like I've said, failure is not an option. If you choose to step away from your loneliness, it's easier. I feel like it's much easier these days to connect to people.
Yes.
We're constantly talking about, oh, we're so connected, but everybody's feeling lonely. Okay, yes, that is the sad reality. How about we make a switch and utilize all the tools we have, like you and I are doing right now, having this wonderful conversation.
Yes.
I connected to people from all over the world. I have helped people heal just by choosing to connect, to step away from my loneliness, to not let it define me anymore. And it's
For sure.
part of having enough with being the victim of life circumstances.
Yeah.
Shining in your power, understand that you're worthy of relationships, even if the previous ones have ended, whether it's romantic or not.
Yeah. Fully agree. And you are right. Loneliness is an epidemic. And
Yeah.
I think it's a subject and a topic that a lot of people maybe feel shamed or maybe just are not comfortable with talking about. And that's even something that, I've had to work through over the years, because it can be a prideful thing to talk about. No one really wants to admit that they're lonely, right? Because
Yeah.
like you said, we live in a day and age we couldn't be any more connected from a digital standpoint, but we've also never been lonelier. It's just these two things that doesn't make sense, but it's a reality.
But it's there.
Because people are getting this false sense of what reality is in this social media age, and then when they're going on Instagram or Facebook and they're seeing these picture perfect representations
illusion.
Yep. And then they're taking a self-inventory of their own life, and they're realizing that, wow, like I'm not living up or matching up to what I'm seeing.
Not good enough. That is the core belief. If I'm lonely, it means that I'm unworthy.
Yeah.
Unworthy. I'm not good enough. What a dangerous state of mind. Been there. Been there. I could literally cry right now.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The reality is that you and I both acknowledge that we both are still a work in progress, right? Like we've done a lot of
healing. We always are.
We've done a lot of healing, but we also understand that this is an ongoing issue that we have to work through, right?
Yeah.
And I think the bravery of you and I talking about this really will encourage other people, because once another person is able to feel understood by hearing other people acknowledge the reality of loneliness, it really allows them to take a step out of that darkness, and it gets illuminated, and they start to think to themselves, I'm so glad someone mentioned that, because this is how I've been feeling. And when you're lonely and when you're in that isolated perspective, it's really hard to understand and to think that other people, know what that's like. It feels so unique and individual to us in the pit of our loneliness. And so people, if you're hearing this right now, just know that we get it, right? And we're a lot more connected we're a lot more connected than we realize. So I know that this podcast is, we're having a great conversation, Carolina, but I do want to, kind of wrap this up and bring it back to the point of this conversation. And I think that is in the midst of a really, destructive experience, a very life-changing experience of divorce, that doesn't need to define us, and it certainly has not defined you and me. In fact, I really
define your life in general.
Exactly. You and I think, have used this painful experience to become a lot wiser, to grow more into our identity, and to use this to help others out of the darkness, and to grow. And I think that's so important. Carolina, why don't you share with us, what the audience, a little bit more of where they can find you, and if they're struggling with a particular area that needs healing, please share with the audience of where they can find you, and again, recap what kind of services you offer, so that way they can hopefully connect with you.
But before we get into this little advertisement of my services, which are spectacular and amazing, just one tip that might be helpful for people who are struggling right now. I always talk about it on my channel about redefining tragedy and loss into opportunity, right? We mentioned that. Redefining your life into an adventure. Adventure, my friend. Okay. It has a lot to do with the inner child healing and all of these processes, but just one tip: try and look at your life like this is the book of life. You have this beautiful, long book with as many pages as your life is, right? And would have been a book with only the best stories, just the good stories, everything is great, everything is wonderful, you would get bored after the third chapter, my friend. Okay, you would just leave that and you'd be like, nothing is happening. Like these little moments in life, little or big or whatever, any kind of tragedy that we're experiencing, it's just part of a bigger, larger tapestry of life. Don't let that one moment define the entire story. No, it's another stepping stone into the next chapter. It's another cliffhanger. It's another chapter in your hero's journey. Okay, and this is something we gotta get on another episode. Talk just about the hero's journey and tie it up to just relationships and the loss of them and all of that. But just this breakup that you're going through, this divorce, this detachment that you're experiencing right now that is tearing you apart. It's not who you are. It's just one thing that happened in your life, and it's an opportunity for you to look inward and to learn so much about yourself and about the world you live in. Just look at it as a story. Understand that another chapter is coming. The sea is coming, my sweet anemone. Trust that the journey isn't over. Do not accept failure. Don't close the book up. There's more to come. There is more to come. So keep on going. Keep on paddling. Just, keep on living. Live, 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 live. Live and love. You shall love again.
That's so great, Carolina. Our stories are not over. And to your point, there's a lot of our book that still needs to be written. And so we can't be living back in those chapters that need to be closed because new ones await to us. So that's so fantastic. So I just want to thank you again, Carolina, for coming on this podcast, The Path to Purpose, on episode 5. And we hope that everyone had a lot of encouragement and a lot of takeaways out of this very important conversation. So until next time.
And now you have the awareness that it's a book. Take the pen in your hands, my friend. Start writing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right,
guys. Thank you, Chris, for having me.
My pleasure, Carolina. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.